Okay.
All right, do that again, Jack.
Which part? Roll call, please.
Mr. Bova.
Here.
Mrs. Cerrucci. Here. Mrs. Delaney. Here. Mrs. McBride. Here. Ms. Mungo.
Here.
Dr. Singh.
Here.
Mr. Ritter.
Here.
Mrs. Warning. Here. And Mr. Williams.
Present. All right, do we have any comments from residents on agenda items? That would be a negative. Let's move on to items previously tabled. We seem to have one of those.
Doing anything?
That, Scotty?
Are we doing anything, or are we gonna remain tabled?
Well, I think that we might want to consider leaving it tabled until next meeting, which is our work session meeting next week, when we can actually untable it and discuss the issue at hand and give ourselves an opportunity to make a decision by the following week, unless someone has a burning desire to do it right now. We do have Mr. Lassick.
I do. I would like to make a motion to untable this.
Second.
That motion was made by, oh, you're right here. Nice.
This was going to be a quick meeting.
It was going to be a quick meeting.
Sorry.
Roll call, please.
Okay. Mrs. Cerrucci.
No.
Mrs. Delaney.
Aye.
Mrs. McBride.
Aye.
Ms. Mungo.
No.
Dr. Singh.
I don't know.
Just untabling it for conversation.
Yes, I
Yeah,
No, I
Untable
asked.
for conversation.
Okay. No.
Mr. Ritter.
Aye.
Mrs. Warning.
Aye.
Mr. Williams.
Aye.
And Mr. Bova.
No.
Motion carries to remove from the table.
Roger that.
Okay.
Go ahead, whoever untabled it. Floor is yours.
I would just like to have you speak while you're here and while you're here.
So I don't have a lot of new information from the last time that we previously spoke. The way that I had come up with the numbers for it was I came up with 12 different school districts from around the Pittsburgh area to see what they spent on supplemental contracts for their musical production. We had numbers that ranged from $2,400 up to $31,200 for what different school districts paid for their supplemental contracts in different schools for their spring musical. That ended up being an average of $15,201.18. My proposal that I put together ended up being about $17,000 in supplemental contracts in order to run the musical here at Gateway. Most all of those numbers, with the exception of, I think, the choreographer, in my proposal, are less than what those people were paid last year for the musical. So it wasn't, the numbers that I put forward aren't more than we've been paid in the past, it's less. But I thought that this would be a good starting point for us to get us on a more equal footing with other schools that, where the district pays for the supplemental and then the ad revenue and the ticket sales can go towards the actual production, the rights to do the show, I believe last year were around $5,800. And that's before you build a set, or before you get a costume, or before you pay your musicians, or the sound equipment that you rent, or the lighting equipment that you rent. I believe last year we looked, I think the musical last year lost somewhere around $4,000. And moving forward, my concern in trying to get the musical up and running is if we can't tell somebody what they're going to be paid ahead of time, I think it's going to be hard for us to find people to do it. And so my concern is if we don't have these numbers up front, that if we put an ad out to say we're soliciting people to come and direct the musical, we can't necessarily tell them what they're going to get paid because we are right now contingent upon the ad revenue and the ticket sales. And we don't know what the ad revenue and the ticket sales are until we've gone through all of our shows. So in my estimation, this is how we move towards a more solvent musical theater program that's not going to work in the negative. I think we started the year, it was around $10,000?
$10,210.
And so now I think right now we're at around 41.
Yep.
So in order to, if we ran that same thing for this year, then you're looking at, negative $2,000. So in my estimation now, is it possible that you could find people to do it in the way that it's done in the past? It's definitely possible. I was just looking for a way to get us on par with other.
Understood. And you mentioned perhaps staging it on days, changing the schedule.
In the past years, we've done 6 shows over 2 weekends.
Right.
My thought would be, because when you pay for your royalties and the rights to do the show, there are 3 things that the publishing house takes into account when they tell you how much it's going to cost you to do it. The number of shows that you do, the price of your tickets, and the size of your house. The past few years, our auditorium seats 1,000 people, but we haven't really been that close to filling those 1,000 seats. So my thought was maybe if we went to 1 weekend and 4 shows as opposed to 2 weekends and 6, that might be a way to save some money along the way. We could also look at, I know Dr. Short and I had talked some about the possibility of maybe getting in contact with Forbes as far as the printing of the programs. I think we sold around $15,000 worth of ads last year, but to print everything, I think that ended up being close to $6,000. So that cuts into that revenue. We're definitely, I've never run the books for the musical here before.
Who runs the books?
In the past, that would have been the producer. So in my time here, I've filled in the roles of being the drama director and I've been the vocal director, but I've never been the producer, so I haven't done the books in the past.
Was Mr. Helchi considered the
Yes,
producer?
and then before that,
Mr. Reed.
Mr. Reed.
So based on the changes that you're looking for, changing the days, the amount of days, and hoping to get, more people on those days and the cost of the licensing a little bit, or what is, not licensing?
The rights, yeah, that's right, the license, that's correct.
All right, you're also going to look at changing the programs. And the supplementals, we have to approve those every year, is that correct? Supplementals need approved every year. So if you continue running the books on this year, and the board is able to, and the district is able to help supplement this year, and you make some changes, the possibility of going back to the way it was is there, or in need of more, and then looking at different things. Is that where we're at right now?
Well,
$1,000 deficit that I can see.
the way that I understand it is all supplementals are able to be given or taken away every year. Am I correct in that?
But you're willing to look at this to see if we can go back to you, the department, next year, possibly just keeping it in-house, or we'll have to look at.
I think it would be a matter of where,
If you start, you're not gonna.
I think it would be a matter of what the ending balance is, because if we had a big enough balance, and maybe it would take more than 1 year, I'm not sure, but if we got to a point where we had a chunk of money at the beginning of the year where we said, we know that we can pay these salaries, right? Because we have that in our student activity account now. Then we could look at saying, okay, well, now our ad revenue and our ticket sales could pay for the musical itself because we already have that money. But then the question becomes, if we do that 1 year, maybe, would it be like 2 years on, 2 years off? That part I don't know, because I'm not as familiar with the book side of it.
So why do you think we lost 4,000? What was?
6. They lost 6.
Did you say 4?
Six.
6. What do you think-
6,
What
yeah.
was the?
Ticket sales weren't quite what we wanted.
COVID.
COVID, I mean, the big thing for ticket sales is when it's the number of kids that you have, who's coming to see the show, right? The parents, there are some community members that come, but when you,
Right.
I think we had around 30 kids in the cast last year. There have been years prior to COVID where we had like 60 kids in the cast. So now you're looking at more people buying those tickets to come there.
Have you looked at which show you wanted to do?
No, because until we get, I'll be perfectly honest, my idea is I don't personally plan on applying for any of these positions. I want to get this in place for people to do so. So I also don't want you to think that I put all this money together and then I'm going to apply for 4 of these supplemental contracts.
Eric's the department chair.
I just felt that it was my role as department chair to try to get us to a place to be ready to put the musical together. I'd be happy to sit down and, depending on who applies, if there needs to be an interview process, I'd be happy to do all that. If no one applies internally or externally, I'd be happy to try to fill in a spot if I need to. But I don't want anybody thinking like.
Eric's been very instrumental in the transition of the marching band. And that's appreciated. I think Ms. Cerrucci had a question or two.
Okay, so first let me say, my hesitancy is not, I want to keep I love the musical. I'm fully supportive of the program, and I
Yep.
want to see it continue, just so you understand that.
Yep.
I'm a little bit reluctant to just throw $17,000 into the budget, but I want to make sure that you understand that if we do that, Mr. Zarellis is going to take over the finances of the entire musical.
Love it. Yeah.
I just want to make sure
Yeah.
that you understand that,
I do.
because in my talking.
I don't involved in that either, for me.
Right, in my talking, I did talk to some other families that I know that have been involved in the musicals in the past, and they said that they have never in the past wanted to lose the control. So once we take over all the supplementals, you're in essence are losing the financial control of your program. I want to make sure that not only you, but the people that involved are
Yeah.
okay with that. And I might think I'm going to offer an alternate suggestion because of COVID and because this is such a big change and because we don't even have a producer right now. We haven't really even replaced the position of the person that was the producer officially, correct?
Yes.
That it's kind of a transition year. So what if, I am going to make a motion for consideration for next board meeting, Bonnie, that we donate or provide, not donate, $6,000 to the 2023 Gateway High School musical to help them offset and start off the year on an even footage and see how this year goes as an alternative to just fully taking over the musical while we haven't even replaced Mr. Helge yet.
All right, so, I'm not an expert on Robert's rules, so right now we have this motion untabled with these dollar figures.
So they can be
So,
two.
so this is the one we'll be voting on. Now, you're proposing an alternative if this doesn't pass, yes? Okay, just want to,
Well, if she makes a motion next week
Yes, well, I mean-
to amend the motion
Okay.
that's on the floor, you have to vote on the amendment first. So if her amendment is, I just want to pay $6,000, that's an amendment to what you have in front of you. The first thing you'll vote on is her amendment. Then you'll go back to, if it passes, then you don't go to the original motion.
Was that what you'd rather me do, to make an amendment to this motion?
That's right.
Well,
I mean,
if
that's
we don't
Robert's
have a
rules.
producer and we haven't filled the role yet, who is taking over this financial Excel spreadsheet? If we do it your way, who is going to be responsible,
The producer of the show, right?
That we don't have yet.
which we don't have?
Well, and I think that would be my concern is, we'll still be at the point of that we don't know. How do we go find a producer or a director or a set designer if we don't know, even with that $6,000? So that means we have 10,000 bucks in the bank. So how are we finding someone without that definite, here's your job and here's what you're getting paid, I think is in my personal opinion, I think it might be better if you did this for a year, see where we're at, and maybe the $6,000 thing for next year, we would find that would work.
Is this the lowest amount that you've ever seen in this account? Have you gone back and looked?
That I couldn't tell you. I don't have that information.
So we don't have any history of the last
Yeah, I was only given
years
this,
of musicals.
I was only given a spreadsheet from the prior year, and it was a mess.
I mean, you could probably look at the student activity account and see what the balances were, like June 30th of that. That would be my guess.
Understood, and so since we're discussing this, what we discussed last time, and I'm sticking to my thought that at some point, I'd like to have a discussion about all these supplementals, all of these extracurriculars, and some degree of consistency across the board, so that we address each of these many things that we do in a similar way at least, so everyone's sort of on the same footing, and then perhaps ultimately what we're deciding are dollars. Because right now, we're not just deciding dollars, we're deciding kind of a different way of funding this. And honestly, I don't know enough about all the other supplementals and extracurriculars to know I know you're saying this is consistent with other school districts. Is this consistent with what we're doing in our other supplementals and extracurriculars?
Well, I guess part
And that's
of,
what I was hoping, Mike and I were gonna get together, and he was gonna tell me about that at some point, but he keeps blowing me off, so I can't.
The question that I had
He
in the
couldn't care less
past,
about my questions.
the students that were involved in the musicals did fundraising, correct? Are you still, not you, but whomever, are they still going to be expected to
I would
fundraise?
anticipate that, yes. Yes, they would still have to sell ads. The main fundraiser for the students was selling ads. They did some candy sales too, but if you look on those sales, for as much candy sales as we did, that profit margin isn't
Right.
really something that really helped the books that much. So the ad sales is going to be is the main
so is it,
push.
As of now, you're not sure what production you're gonna do.
No, we can, until we have a production staff in place, none of that can be done.
But you haven't even looked to get pricing or.
No.
Typically, the producer, director will get together to determine, okay,
Well, and especially this year with, there were a lot of seniors that graduated last year, so who comes out? Usually the way the musical has worked here in the past is they have auditions first. And then they pick the show from the audition. So they say, okay, we have this kid, this kid, this kid, and this kid. This show would fit the talent that we have. That's how that's how auditions have been done here over the years. Now, not every school does that. Like Woodland Hills announces their show in August regardless, and they say, this is the show that we're doing. Depending on how the production staff wanted to do it, they could do it either way they want.
And excuse my lack of knowledge, but it just seems like it makes sense to kind of have an idea what you're gonna spend on a production and, like, I want to look in, like if I'm looking for a car and I know what my budget is or what my pocketbook can handle, I'm only going to look at certain cars. I'm not going
Right.
to go up here and look at the cream of the crop when I know I can afford that. So
Right.
it's just
And
didn't know how, because
Until
of my
we
lack
have the talent, until we know what type of kids are here, how many kids are here, or even in a lot of cases for high school musicals, it's how many boys and how many girls. Like, you're always looking for more gentlemen to be a part of it. So until you know those things, it's hard to pick your show.
When do they usually have tryouts for that?
They've usually happened in November. I believe last year was November.
Is there any plans to do that yet?
No, because they don't. So last year, just to put this in perspective, they started with a $10,000 budget, and they spent $47,500 on the musical. And now this year, they're starting with a $4,000 budget. So to buy the rights and licensing is a lot more than that, and I think Disney's like quadruple.
The licensing last year for Drowsy, I believe, was around 58. I think it's on that budget from last year.
So what you're saying is, as of right now, you, with the money that you have, without the district's help, this might not even happen.
My concern is too, we have had in the past a lot of talent. And I know we have lost some of our students to a nearby school because of what they offer, and our productions have always been phenomenal. So I don't know if you're making your motion or what, but I just feel we should give this a try for this year to see how it goes to get it started.
I think we need to find the best way to save the musical. I'm in agreement.
Right.
This is that whole thing where
Correct.
we all want the same outcome, but we view different ways to get there.
Correct.
And we need to figure out the best one.
Right, and we don't need to decide that tonight.
I'm not positive what
And
that
again,
is.
this was Mr. Lassick, department chair, coming forward, meeting with the administration to lay the groundwork for future productions and musicals.
Well,
And I do like the fact that, Mary Beth, he's also saying, like, we're going to look at different things to eliminate some of it, to hopefully have a, to have a credit come next year, and maybe with the opportunity for them to.
Can I ask a couple more questions?
Sure.
Do we have any idea on who a director, voice coach, or dance coach might be?
No.
None of the above?
No, I mean, if all of those things got approved, then it would have to be posted internally, and then it would have to be posted, depending on who applied, then it would have to be posted externally.
You haven't waited, this is where I'm not understanding, because I understand we were missing a key player here, but in past years, you never had guaranteed money from us, and you still had auditions, had a voice coach, had a dance person, had a director. Why right now is everything, just be honest with me, like, why is everything just stopped?
To be perfectly honest,
Yes.
I don't feel comfortable personally doing that if I don't know that there's going to be payment for it. And I realize that there are other people in the past that have felt that way, and more power to them. And if you feel that there are people out there that would be willing to do that, that's totally cool too. My thought
Listen,
as,
I appreciate this is the first year you've had this kind of role trying to shepherd this thing, so I appreciate it.
yeah. And so,
I get it
my
completely.
point is, if there are people out there and you want to take some time and go, say, put an ad in the newspaper or however that works to say, we're looking for people to come and do
Listen,
this.
it took us about a year to
That's
find
okay.
an HR director, so I don't know how we'd find
my
someone to
understanding,
direct the play.
I watch it,
Seriously.
I don't participate in it, so I don't know if in the past, the voice coaches and were they people that were part of the Gateway staff? Were they
Last year,
all
I was the
outside?
vocal director, and Mr. Helchi was the producer and the orchestra conductor. Larry Servi was from outside, and he was the director.
Okay.
And we also had somebody from the outside that was the choreographer, and an outside set painter, and an outside set construction person.
Okay. That helps me, thank you.
Okay. And what other questions can I help you with? Because I totally get that this is a lot at once.
Significant
Totally
change
understand.
to our
I
operation.
totally get that.
Listen, a few months ago, because someone made a miscalculation on scoreboards, we spent how much to get a couple more new scoreboards? So I understand our job is to be diligent with the people's money, but this is an amenity, much like athletic fields and scoreboards, which no one would say is integral to education, but is a big part of the experience and has brought much to this community. So whether, this year we decided to do 6,000 or 14,000, and I don't want anyone to misinterpret this, but that is such a, you want to do the numbers, the percentage of our budget, Mike? So I'd like us to be consistent with everything else. This is me. I'd like us to be consistent with everything else. I'd like us to also acknowledge that we often spend money on things that add to the entire experience for the families, for the community, for the students, and this is one of them.
Mr. Dice, do you have a recommendation on how, using the rules of order, we can proceed with these multi-headed approaches that we've laid out in order to get this done in a timely fashion?
One of the questions I have, how many years have you guys been putting on plays?
So I said 50 years.
I mean, what fell off the cart this year that it's so difficult? I mean, I don't know. We had one person.
Yeah.
Okay, but there are so many different people in the thing. Why isn't it moving forward like it did
Mr.
last
Dice,
year?
please, no more questions.
I have no way of giving you.
He's referencing Ms. Cerrucci's $6,000 motion relative to the existing motion that's
Okay.
here. And I think you've already answered the question.
I've already
Come
answered
next
it.
week, we can either choose to.
If she makes a motion to say 6,000.
Right, and 5 people agree with that, then we'll say yes to that. If 5 people don't,
That's
then
exactly
we'll move
right.
on to
It's
this.
that simple.
I'm sorry?
It was just tabled.
It's just been untabled for discussion.
I said it wasn't meant to be.
Oh,
Okay.
right, yes, ma'am, correct.
It's on section
Okay, Mr. Williams, did that answer, did I answer?
personnel.
We can so our procedure now is to simply leave it untabled and vote next week
Yes, sir.
Okay. So it's still
for
untabled, okay.
approval. And now will that
And you may get an
timeline?
amendment.
But it is on the personnel agenda.
It is on the agenda though
It is, right,
So we can table it then.
again, if we're going to.
You can leave it off the table. It doesn't have to be.
Yeah,
Doesn't
I
have to be
think
voted on.
Leave it.
this isn't set for, I know you can vote tonight, but ordinarily this would not be the time when you would take up subjects to vote, other than the very specific subject
And
of
understand
an
that-
HR director.
Which the board asked that I convene this group to discuss this. You remember
All right, so
at our
then
last meeting?
Right, yes.
a better way to proceed would be to go ahead and
Yeah.
conduct the vote now because it's on the agenda, it's been untabled. And then if we need to amend it next week, based on late arriving information, we
I
could.
disagree that we are not voting on this. It's not an action item.
Right, I'm comfortable with Mr. Dice's suggestion that we go to next week.
Right.
Can we leave it untabled?
Yes.
Sure, okay.
Yes.
Let's do that.
But, okay, I know it's not an action item, but neither is,
That's a mistake. Andrea Jessel employment needs to be an action item. That's why we have this meeting.
Right, yes.
a meeting for both, I thought. That was
Right, so,
the,
I was given the agenda with that item on it.
right, yes. All
I
right.
mean, if you feel you're prepared to vote on,
I am not, and I would like the week to think about the 2 options, perhaps talk to another person or 2, but mostly I want to talk to Mike about where we're going to find money for these supplementals, and also get a handle on how we do all of the various supplementals, so that going forward, we have some consistency and reliability, and these groups can know what they're dealing with year to year, and how it happened in the past is sort of interesting, but not really. The past is the past. There's a formula, there you go, and it's buried in the backyard, and Dr. Short will dig it up so we can see it. All right, any more questions? Okay, excellent, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
You've done this twice now, and you did it beautifully both times. You know what? Maybe some courtroom drama, a musical.
Well,
A musical.
I do some acting on the
12 Angry Men.
you want to talk?
The next role.
Is there a chance for me at some point to say something?
Absolutely.
No, ma'am, I'm sorry. Come on, get in here, get up there, absolutely.
I'm Mary Chase. I live at 740 Illini Drive. I have my 5th child, a junior this year.
Bless
The other
you.
4 graduated from Gateway. I've been part of the musical program with my children since 2014. And while Eric is an amazing person who stepped in last year and has stepped in since the things that happened this summer, to give you a heads up, it wasn't just one person. This was one person who prayed on my daughter as well as another person. I am also the president of the Gateway Band Boosters. And do you do that budget too? Because I'm pretty sure I do. And we get supplementals for that. So that's one thing. I'm not sure why you're saying that. It has to be now this Mike Zarellis, because the Gateway Band Boosters, we get supplementals, and then I have to deal with a big budget that, is the band boosters that covers the band, marching band budget, and the winter bands. Anyways, as the president of the Theater Guild, I have had my hands in a lot of this from a volunteer standpoint. Kids have had to get $600 in ads or pay $300 to be part of the musical since I've been here in 2014. So that has not changed. When you have 70 kids in the musical and they're getting at least $300, that adds to a pretty big budget line. I know Fiddler on the Roof, we probably had $30,000 or more in ads. It is dependent on the show you do. Larry Servie has been here as a director for many years. He retired this past year. There was a big hoopla for it. That hoopla came because of me, because the other person who was going to this did not get to it. Mr. Helchi, I handled it for Glass Menagerie. We had the newscast here showing Gateway in a wonderful light, showing the kids who got to be interviewed, and they were on the news for the Glass Menagerie. And then, of course, if you look at the last show of last year, you will see the attendance was outstanding because they were there to see off a man who has served the musicals at Gateway, the plays and musicals at Gateway. My children have personally been in a number of plays and musicals. And so when Mr. Lassick is asking for supplementals, as a resident, as a parent, my question is, just because it was done one way, doesn't mean that's not the way it was supposed to be done. I can only assume that their pay fluctuated with the show. If we had something like Fiddler on the Roof and they made a lot of money, they made a lot of money as director, producer, and all that. I don't know. I didn't have my hands in those books. But I do know the past few years, relativity, you're saying theory of relativity was the books are a mess. Everything was a mess during COVID. We were very excited to put on something. And it was a very small show, a very separated show where the kids were on stage very much not hugging and kissing and dancing for a production. It was a different kind of production, and we were only permitted to house so many people in the audience. So I think that one cannot be considered in any of this. This past year, we were redoing a show that was picked to do in 2020. So there was an entity of people who had graduated in 2020 and were upset that they were not in that show because of COVID, so it was maybe a touchy subject for them. So anyways, when you look at this past year, I keep thinking, how do we get more kids involved? Because if you get more kids involved, you get more ads. I think in a school district with our amount of free reduced lunches, it's astronomical to ask the kid to come up with $300 or $600 in ads. I know personally I had a goal to get as many ads as possible, and I went to high dollar ads looking for, I ended up getting like $1,200, $1,300, $1,400 in ads for my kid just because I wanted to offset for some of the kids who couldn't do it. And the candy was sold strictly to make the kids who didn't have parental support feel like they were doing a part. And for me, those are kids that deserve to be in the musical, just like a kid who sold the $600 in ads. So, and I know personally kids that fit that bill, and they were wonderful on the stage, and they helped the community see a wonderful production. So when you look at Larry Servie retiring this past year, when you look at Jim Helchi no longer being here, it is a big deal, because how do you just throw someone in? You can't fill Larry Servie's shoes with just anybody. You can't just say, let's just pick this show. And then you pick a show, you have a show ready, and then you come in and maybe you have an influx, you pick something like Little Women, and then you have an influx of boys who decide to join. Well, here you go, ensemble for you, which we'd have to switch the shows. You can see over the years, we have switched the shows, and that costs money too. We were looking at Chorus Line last year, and then we did not get enough boys, so then they switched to Drowsy Chaperone, because we had some things already in play for it, trying to save some money. So as a person who is used to getting an email from the producer in September saying, let's get ready, we're gonna have our musical meeting early October. We're gonna have, then they announce, you can't say to the kids, we're gonna have auditions next week, because they actually go to voice coaches to practice their songs. How do we tell kids now? Get to the voice coach right now. Because sometime in the next month or 3, there will be an audition. So the longer you put this off, the longer we see that we're not gonna have the potential to have the best that Gateway always puts off. We don't have all the support like Woodland Hills has. They have an entity of people. They don't charge their kids $300 in ads. If they want to get an ad, great. They have a community of support that gives them money. Franklin Regional, kids have to sell one $150 ad. That's different. And if they don't sell it, then they sell candy or do whatever. You know, that's different than $300 or $600 in ads, which is what we have done. So I understand the money side of it as best as I can from, I was pretty close to Mr. Helchi during all of this because, being play, musical, and band, we talked a lot about all this going on. So when you're thinking about this, you got to think first and foremost of the kids, and the longer you delay, the longer it goes before these kids will.
Ma'am, we're going to vote on this next week. So that next week, we're going to vote on this, and from what you've heard, it's going to be one number or the other almost certainly. So that's what we're going to do. We're voting next week. I'm sure that if we had another time, Ms. Cerrucci could tell us how much it costs to be the parent of a kid who plays hockey. That's my whole point, what I said earlier. At some point, I would like the opportunity to discuss these things across the board so we could get some consistency. We're voting next week, and at that point, ideally, the machinery will start and we'll find the people necessary to put on the best production that we can, just like every year. And next year, we won't have this debate because we'll have established the way we do things. So, yes?
All right, thank you.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Can we move forward to?
Yes. We're going to move on to, I don't know, what else we got? How about a personnel agenda? What do you think?
Personnel agenda. Dr. Rossi, you want to?
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks,
everybody. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Mr. Lacy.
Item number 1, approve the employment of the following individual for the position indicated. Andrea Jeschel, Human Resources Director, Gateway School District, effective November 2022.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions on that?
Yeah, I have a few. Kidding.
After what you just saw, are you still interested?
What do you say?
Mr. Dyson just suggested that as an addendum, we make sure that our new HR director produces the play.
Can you sing?
You sing, musical, producer?
Do you have any experience?
I think I like this. All right, ma'am, can I have a roll call? We had no questions, right? Yes, a roll call, please.
Mrs. Delaney.
Aye.
Mrs. McBride.
Aye.
Where'd she go? Ms. Mongo. Aye. Dr. Singh.
Aye.
Mr. Ritter.
Aye.
Mrs. Warning.
Aye.
Mr. Williams.
Aye.
Mr. Boba.
Aye.
And Mrs. Cerrucci.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Welcome aboard.
There you go. Congratulations. Thank you.
Make that resignation tonight.
Please say that.
No comments from anyone? We don't have anyone to comment. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed. Thank you all.
Congratulations, I'll be in touch.